For 31 years, Elias Vane had believed his grandfather was dead. Everyone told him the same story. In the summer of 1995, Professor Adrian Vane disappeared during an expedition into the remote Blackridge Mountains. 7 people had entered the mountains searching for an ancient underground settlement rumored to exist beneath the peaks. Only one person returned. That survivor claimed the expedition had been destroyed by a cave-in. No bodies were recovered. No equipment was found. Eventually, the authorities declared the remaining explorers dead. Elias had been only a child when his grandfather disappeared, but he remembered one thing clearly. His grandfather had always been afraid of the mountains. Then, one rainy evening, Elias received a package. There was no return address. Inside was a rusted metal key and a leather journal covered in dust. Elias immediately recognized the handwriting. It belonged to his grandfather. He opened the journal. Most of the pages described geological formations, ancient symbols, and unexplained structures. But toward the end, the writing became increasingly frantic. One sentence appeared again and again. "Do not enter the hollow meridian." Elias continued reading. His grandfather described discovering a massive stone door buried beneath Blackridge Mountain. Behind it was an underground civilization. But the final entry was different. The handwriting was shaky. "We were 7 when we entered." A second line followed. "Only one of us will return. Then, if Elias ever finds this journal, destroy it." Elias froze. He slowly turned the page. There was one final sentence. "If you are reading this, it already knows your name." A loud sound came from outside. Elias looked toward the window. His house stood alone at the edge of the forest. Rain hammered the glass. Then he noticed something in the mud outside. Footprints. Someone had walked from the forest to his front door. Elias stared at them. There were no footprints leading away. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The trail continued into the forest, toward Blackridge Mountain, and beside the first footprint was a fresh mark carved into the mud. The same symbol his grandfather had drawn throughout the journal. Elias knew what he was going to do. He was going to find the hollow meridian. 3 days later, Elias reached Blackridge. The mountain range was colder than he expected. Clouds covered the peaks, and thick forest surrounded the lower slopes. He followed coordinates written in the journal until his GPS stopped working. According to his grandfather's notes, the entrance should have been nearby. But there was nothing. Only rocks, trees, and silence. Elias searched for nearly 2 hours before discovering a strange stone embedded in the mountainside. It wasn't natural. Its surface was perfectly smooth. He brushed away dirt and found the same symbol from the journal. A wolf-like figure surrounded by a circle. He pressed against the stone. Nothing happened. Then he noticed a small indentation. He inserted the metal key. The mountain trembled. A crack appeared in the rock. Slowly, an enormous section of the mountainside moved inward. Behind it was a staircase. Elias stared into the darkness. His grandfather had been telling the truth. He turned on his flashlight and descended. The staircase continued downward for nearly 20 minutes. The air became colder. Then the tunnel opened. Elias stepped into a cavern so enormous that his flashlight couldn't reveal the ceiling. Far below was a city. An entire city. Stone towers rose from the darkness. Bridges connected enormous buildings. Strange statues lined the streets. Everything was covered in gray dust. Elias whispered, "Impossible." He descended farther. His footsteps echoed through the cavern. Then he noticed something strange. Every statue was facing the staircase. Every single one. Thousands of stone faces were staring directly at him. Elias raised his flashlight toward one. Its expression was almost human. He moved closer. There was something carved beneath its feet. A name. Adrian Vane. Elias stepped backward. His grandfather's statue stood among them. But there was something else. The stone around the statue was fresh. Almost as if it had been created recently. Then Elias heard a sound. Footsteps. Behind him. He spun around. Nothing. He slowly raised his flashlight. The staircase was empty. Then one of the statues moved. Only slightly. Its stone head turned toward him. Elias froze. He watched it. Nothing happened. He turned away and started walking toward the city. Behind him, the statue turned its head again. This time, it followed him with its eyes. Elias entered the underground city. The streets were enormous. Ancient buildings surrounded him, their walls covered with symbols he couldn't understand. But something bothered him. The city didn't look abandoned. There were signs of previous visitors everywhere. A broken compass, a rusted lantern, an old military radio, a child's backpack. Elias picked up the backpack. Inside was a photograph. A family stood smiling beside a mountain. On the back was written, Blackridge Expedition, 1978. Elias frowned. His grandfather's expedition had taken place in 1995. How could this have been here 17 years earlier? He continued exploring. Inside another building, he found a camera. The film was still inside. Elias examined the photographs. They showed explorers walking through the same city. But the final photograph made his blood run cold. It showed the explorers standing beside a stone wall. Behind them stood a man. The man's face was blurred. Elias recognized the clothing. It belonged to his grandfather. But the photograph was dated 1964, 31 years before his grandfather's disappearance. Elias backed away. Then he heard breathing, not his own. Someone was standing behind him. He turned. Nothing. His flashlight flickered. When it came back on, there was writing on the wall. It hadn't been there before. Elias Vane. His heart stopped. Below his name was a date. Tomorrow's date. Elias touched the wall. The stone was warm. Then he heard a woman's voice. Don't touch it. Elias spun around. A woman stood at the end of the street. She looked about 30. Dark hair, weathered clothes, a scar across her cheek. She stared at him. You shouldn't be here. Who are you? My name is Mara. How do you know my name? Mara didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward the statues. They know it too. A deep sound echoed through the city. Something between a growl and a distant human scream. Mara grabbed Elias's arm. We have to leave. Why? Because the city has noticed you. Elias looked back. The statues were no longer facing the staircase. They were all facing him. Mara whispered, don't look at them for too long. Why? Because sometimes. She swallowed. They looked back. Mara led Elias through narrow streets until they reached an underground building. Inside were supplies, water, food, maps, dozens of notebooks. Elias immediately noticed something. Every notebook belonged to a different expedition. Who were these people? Explorers. Where are they now? Mara looked away. Some disappeared. And the others? They never really left. Elias stared at her. Mara explained that she had entered the city 6 years earlier with 4 other people. They discovered the same things Elias had. The statues, the photographs, the impossible dates. Then one night, their leader heard his mother's voice calling from outside their shelter. His mother had been dead for 15 years. He followed the voice. He never returned. The others disappeared one by one. Mara was the only survivor. Elias asked, what is this place? Mara shook her head. We don't know. Then what are you afraid of? Mara looked directly at him. Something underneath it. A cold wind passed through the building. Elias heard his grandfather's voice. Elias. He froze. Mara's face changed. You heard that? Elias nodded. His grandfather's voice came again. Elias, come here. The voice sounded exactly right. The same tone. The same warmth. Elias took one step toward the doorway. Mara grabbed him. Don't. That was my grandfather. No, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. The voice came again. Elias. This time it sounded frightened. Please. Elias pulled away. Mara whispered. It knows the people you love. Suddenly, something slammed against the building. The lights went out. Elias heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy, human. Mara whispered. Whatever happens, don't open the door. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then someone knocked. 3 times. Elias looked at Mara. Her face had gone completely pale. The voice outside said, Elias? Then, I know you're in there. The knocking continued for nearly 10 minutes. Neither Elias nor Mara moved. Eventually, the voice disappeared. They waited. Nothing happened. Then Elias noticed something strange. Mara was staring at the wall. What? She pointed. A shadow was moving across it. But there was nothing casting it. The shadow slowly formed the shape of a man. Then it vanished. Mara whispered. It found us. They escaped through a hidden passage. The tunnel led beneath the city. The walls became covered with ancient drawings. They showed people entering the underground world. Then showed those people becoming shadows. Finally, they reached a huge circular chamber. Someone was standing in the center. Elias stopped breathing. The man turned. He was old. His hair was gray. His face was thin. But Elias recognized him immediately. Grandpa? Adrian Vane looked at him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Adrian whispered, "You shouldn't have come." Elias ran toward him. Adrian stopped him. "Don't touch me." "Why?" "Because I don't know if I'm still me." Elias stared. Adrian explained the truth. The city was not built by humans. It was built around something much older. Something that lived beneath the mountain. The explorers had called it the listener. It didn't eat flesh. It consumed memories. Every person who entered gave it pieces of themselves. Their childhoods. Their loved ones. Their fears. Eventually, it could reproduce them. A voice. A face. A person. Adrian pointed toward the darkness. "That thing has been copying us for centuries." Elias asked, "Why are you still alive?" Adrian looked at him sadly. "I wasn't." Elias froze. "What?" Adrian smiled. "I died 31 years ago." Mara stepped backward. Adrian continued, "What you're looking at isn't your grandfather." His face began changing. The skin distorted. The eyes became completely black. The mouth stretched unnaturally wide. Then the creature spoke in Elias's voice. "But I remember him." Elias and Mara ran. Behind them came hundreds of voices. His grandfather. His mother. His childhood friends. All calling his name. They eventually reached a massive chamber. Mara slammed the stone door shut. Elias collapsed against the wall. "What was that?" Mara didn't answer. She was staring at the center of the chamber. Thousands of glowing fragments floated in the air. Each one contained a memory. Elias saw a little boy riding a bicycle. A woman holding her newborn child. A man standing beside his dead brother. A family eating dinner. A soldier saying goodbye. Entire lives were suspended in the darkness. Mara whispered, "The memory vault." Elias approached one fragment. Inside, he saw himself. He was 6 years old. His grandfather was beside him. They were standing in Elias's childhood home. But Elias remembered this day. His grandfather had given him a wooden compass. The memory continued. His grandfather looked directly toward the 6-year-old Elias. Then toward the invisible observer. Toward adult Elias. He said, "If you're seeing this, I failed." Elias stepped backward. The memory changed. His grandfather stood in the underground city. He was younger. He looked terrified. He spoke. "The listener doesn't just copy memories." He pointed toward the darkness. "It feeds on them." Then another memory appeared. Elias saw himself standing inside the same chamber. But the memory was dated 31 years earlier. He stared at it. "That can't be me." Mara looked horrified. "That's why it wanted you here." Elias turned toward her. "What do you mean?" Mara pointed at the floating memories. "All these years, it has been collecting pieces of people." Then she looked at Elias. "But you." She paused. "You are different." "Why?" "Because it already remembers you." A voice whispered behind them. "Of course I do." They turned. Elias was standing there. Another Elias. Same face. Same clothes. Same voice. The duplicate smiled. And said, "You've been here before." Elias couldn't move. The duplicate stood only a few meters away. It looked exactly like him. Every scar. Every expression. Every detail. Mara raised her weapon. The duplicate laughed. "You won't hurt me." "Who are you?" Elias asked. The creature answered. "You." "No." "Yes." The duplicate stepped forward. "You just don't remember." Suddenly, Elias experienced a violent headache. Images flooded his mind. The underground city. The memory vault. His grandfather. Mara. The final door. Then darkness. Elias fell to his knees. He remembered dying. He remembered standing in this chamber decades earlier. But that was impossible. He wasn't even born. The duplicate crouched beside him. "You were never the first Elias." Mara attacked. The creature disappeared. A scream echoed through the chamber. Mara collapsed. Elias rushed toward her. But there was no blood. Instead, her body began flickering. Fragments of light appeared across her skin. Elias stared. "Mara?" She looked at him sadly. "I told you I was a survivor." Her voice became distorted. "I never said I was alive." Mara explained that the real expedition had died 6 years earlier. The listener had created her from the memories of the woman she once was. She had been trapped inside the city ever since. Elias asked, "Why did you help me?" "Because I remembered what it was like to be human." She pointed toward the final passage. "Your grandfather tried to destroy this place." "Why didn't he?" "He couldn't." "Why?" "Because the only way to destroy the listener." Mara's form began disappearing. "Is to erase the memory vault." Elias understood. If he destroyed the memories, the creature would lose its power. But those memories contained everything. His grandfather, Mara, his own childhood, every person who had ever entered the city. He looked toward the darkness. Something was coming. Mara whispered, "Choose what you are willing to forget." Then she disappeared. Elias entered the final section of the city. The walls were covered with thousands of names. Every explorer who had ever entered Blackridge was listed. Some names were centuries old. Some were recent. And near the bottom was his grandfather's name. Beneath it was another, Elias Vane, but the date beside it wasn't tomorrow. It was 31 years ago. Elias touched the stone. A memory appeared. His grandfather stood in the city with 6 explorers. One of them carried a newborn baby. Elias recognized the baby. It was him. His grandfather had brought him here. Elias couldn't understand. Then the memory revealed the truth. Elias's parents had died when he was very young. His grandfather had discovered that the listener had begun reaching beyond the mountain. It could influence dreams, memories, even distant people. His grandfather believed the only way to protect Elias was to make the creature forget him. So he created a false memory. He erased Elias from every record connected to the expedition. Then he sealed the mountain. But something went wrong. The listener had already copied Elias's memory. It had been waiting for him to return. Elias finally understood why the journal had been hidden. His grandfather hadn't wanted Elias to discover the city. He wanted Elias to forget it existed. Then Elias heard something behind him. His grandfather's voice. "I'm sorry." Elias turned. His grandfather stood there. This time, he looked human. "I couldn't destroy it." Elias asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because remembering it gives it strength." The grandfather's eyes filled with tears. "Every story about this place feeds it." Elias looked toward the memory vault. "How do I stop it?" His grandfather answered, "Forget." Then the entire city began shaking. The listener had awakened. Elias ran toward the memory vault. The underground city collapsed around him. Statues shattered. Buildings cracked. Bridges fell into endless darkness. Behind him came thousands of voices. Every voice belonged to someone he had ever loved. His mother, his grandfather, Mara, friends, people he had forgotten. They begged him to stop. But Elias continued. He reached the final chamber. A massive circular doorway stood before him. Beyond it was a strange mirror. But the mirror wasn't reflecting the chamber. It showed the world above. Cities, forests, people, millions of them. Then Elias understood. The listener didn't want to escape physically. It wanted something else. It wanted to be remembered. The more people learned about it, the stronger it became. If Elias escaped with the truth, the creature would survive. If he told the world about the Hollow Meridian, it would spread through stories, books, videos, memories. Every retelling would feed it. His grandfather appeared beside him. "You know what you had to do." Elias looked at him. "If I destroy the vault, you'll forget me." Elias's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to." "I know." The ground shook. The listener appeared behind them. It wore Elias's face, then his grandfather's, then Mara's, then thousands of faces at once. It whispered, "Remember me." Elias stood before the memory vault. He raised the ancient key and smashed it into the central crystal. The chamber exploded with light. Every memory began disappearing. His grandfather faded. Mara faded. His childhood disappeared. The underground city began collapsing. The listener screamed. Elias screamed too. Then everything went black. Elias woke beneath the open sky. He was lying on the mountainside. Rescue teams found him 2 days later. He couldn't remember how he had arrived there. He couldn't remember entering the mountain. He couldn't remember his grandfather. He couldn't even remember why he had come to Blackridge. Investigators searched the area. They found no entrance, no underground city, no ancient ruins, nothing, only Elias's equipment. His grandfather's journal was recovered from his backpack. But every page was blank. The investigators assumed the ink had deteriorated. Elias returned home. Life slowly returned to normal. But something felt wrong. He had the strange sensation that he had forgotten someone important. Someone he loved. One evening, Elias opened an old family photo album. He stopped. There was a photograph of him as a child. He was standing beside an older man. His grandfather. Elias stared at the photograph. He couldn't remember the man's face. But he began crying anyway. He didn't know why. Then he noticed something behind them in the photograph. A dark doorway. Elias zoomed in. His blood ran cold. The doorway wasn't supposed to be there. and standing inside it was a figure. The figure looked exactly like him. Elias dropped the photograph. That night, he couldn't sleep. At 3:17 a.m., his computer turned on by itself. A blank document appeared. Words slowly began appearing on the screen. "You remembered." Elias stared. Another sentence appeared. "That was the only thing I needed." Then the final sentence appeared. "Now they can remember too." Elias looked toward his bedroom door. It was slightly open. Someone was standing in the hallway. A man. Gray hair. Old clothes. His grandfather's face. Elias whispered, "Grandpa?" The figure smiled. But it wasn't his grandfather. It was something wearing his memory. The screen went black, and the last thing Elias heard was a whisper from somewhere inside the house. "Tell them what you found." Cut to black. End.